Online for Authors. I'm chatting with Buddy Howard, author of The Burden of Evidence. Welcome, Buddy.
Thank you, Terry. It's great to be here.
I am really excited to have you. I enjoyed the book thoroughly. But before we dive in, let's kind of go back and give my listeners just a quick idea. What are they going to find when they open up the cover of The Burden of Evidence?
Well, that's great. And it's one of those questions that I always struggle with because there are a lot of twists and turns,
Yes.
as you know, in the book. And I'm always sensitive to make sure I'm not giving away something that is a surprise or spoiler. And so I'm always trying to do that. But if I had to summarize it, I'd say this is really about a 55-year-old writer whose wife is traumatized and she doesn't want to go to the police. And he does what a lot of husbands, I guess, what I would probably do, which is to take matters in their own hands, and it backfires.
Yeah.
And the more that he realizes that he can't extricate himself from this situation, the more the stakes increase for him. And it really winds up kind of culminating where he really has to make a decision between consequence and conscience, where he's thinking about, do I do the right thing, or do I do this thing that may end up costing me everything that I've come to love? And it's one of those struggles that many of us end up having in some capacity. But for him, it winds up being something where he really struggles with it and he kind of waffles. And you don't really know kind of what he's going to do until really toward the end of the book. And there's also a whodunit element, and that's not really, revealed on the final page. So that was a lot of fun to put in there.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that even on the final page, we were still getting surprises.
Yeah,
So
thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I did enjoy it thoroughly. What made you decide, hey, I'm going to write my first book and it's going to be a thriller? Like what made you do that?
Thank you for asking that. And, when I was in my 20s, I created a bucket list. Yeah. And it was all the things you think of. I'd like to skydive. I'd like to learn to fly a plane, things like that. But one of the other ones was I'd like to write a book or publish a book. And so I have always had in the back of my mind, I'd love to get something out. And when I was at Wake Forest in 1977, there was something, and I can't reveal exactly what it was because it'd give away too much of the book, but something happened, and I talk about this at the end of the book after it's finished, but it made me think, that is fascinating. What if this happened in real life? What if what I'm thinking about happened in real life? And it made me think, this would be a great story. And so, I'm 68. This was going through my head when I was about 20. And so it just percolated for decades. And about 10 years ago, I started writing this story that sort of came out of the Wake Forest days, and started writing a couple of other books as well. And I would write on one book and then I'd pick up the next one. This one was the one that got traction. And so I thought, you know what, go with where the momentum is, keep writing it. And so I went through the whole process of getting beta readers, and people would say, you need to pick up the pace a little bit here. You need to do this, you need to do that. And then, I don't know if this is the way you are, Terry, but with me, I didn't write this book from an outline where I said, okay, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and it'll end this way. There were things that happened, and you alluded to this, I think, in your review that you did, where one of the main characters does stuff, and you go, why did you do that? Please don't do that. And he does. Right. And I love Stephen King's comment. Stephen King one time said in his book on writing, I love to put my characters in impossible situations and then just see what they will do. Yes. And so there were twists that happened all along the way. And then I would think, I've got to write this in. I don't know what he's going to do about it or what she's going to do about it. But I ended up going about 10 years into the process before I finally had dinner with some friends. And I was talking about the book. And the wife said, when are you going to come out with it? And I said, I keep feeling like I'm 9.5 months pregnant with this book. And she said, well, what you need is a deadline. And yours is July 4th, 2025. So this was in early 2025 when this conversation took place. And I want you to know that July 3rd was when I uploaded it to Amazon. So, for anybody who's out there who needs a push, let me tell you, I'm a big proponent of getting an accountability partner.
Absolutely.
Putting a date down and then, checking in and saying, where are we on this? And, the thing that I realized quickly is perfection can be the enemy of good. And, what you want to do, you want to have a good book. And I think I did that. It's not a perfect book, but had I wanted a perfect book, we'd be talking in 10 years and I'd be in a nursing home. So
well, and not only that, but in 10 years you would look at it and say it's not perfect and you would still keep working on it. I mean,
exactly.
that's just the way it goes. Because there truly is always something to change.
Yeah.
In my first book, the one that I had out, I love it, but I look at it now and I can find all kinds of things I would change.
Yeah.
But I could have never gotten to that point without having published it and then the next several. You have to just say, this is it.
Well, and a related thing to that is most people out there, I think, and I don't mean to be acting like holier than thou, I understand things that no one else does. But the fact is, a lot of people don't do it for fear of failure. But my take on failure is you want to do it often and you want to do it quickly, because the more quickly you do that, you get to the right answer quicker.
Right.
So, if you're never willing to fail, you'll never learn. You'll never get to the right answer if you don't fail and fail quickly. Just get comfortable with it. We all fail. And, for me, it was a matter of getting good enough that I just thought, this is my chance to go ahead and put it out.
Well, and it's a debut, and a debut is exactly what it is, which is the first one.
Yeah.
And it's the first one that you felt comfortable letting someone see, and there will be a second and a third, and then they will be different and they will be better, and you'll like those, but you can't get better until you've had your first.
Yeah.
And then you can now have a second. It is a crazy thing.
That's exactly right. I don't know if you know who Brene Brown is.
I do. Yeah.
But she gave a talk, TED Talk, and she has this quote that I just loved, and it's a paraphrase of Teddy Roosevelt's comment about the man in the arena. Are you familiar with it? Mm-hmm. And it, kind of to cut to the chase of it, it's, she ended up giving a talk and somebody gave her some really bad reviews. And she ended up in this talk saying, it really is the man in the arena is the one that counts. It's not the critic who criticizes, who says how the strong man stumbled or could have done it better. It's the man in the arena. Sorry for the sexist, terminology. That's what Teddy Roosevelt said. But it's the person in the arena, who, if he succeeds, knows the triumph of high achievement. But if he fails, at least fails daring greatly. And I think that is such a lesson, because it's a noble thing as a creator, just simply to put something out there. Yeah. And if you do that, sure, you're going to have detractors. You're going to have somebody who doesn't like it, but you're doing your part, and that's all that matters.
Absolutely. I agree. So you alluded to the fact, I believe, that you are a pantser, that you kind of write by the seat of your pants. You don't have an outline. Is that what? Yeah.
That's exactly right. And, and for me, the way that the plot develops is so alive for me when things come up that were unexpected. There is probably halfway into the story, there is a kind of a turning point that kind of changes Paul, the main character's perspective. Mm-hmm. That I'd never thought about that as a plot element. And suddenly it came to me and I thought, wow, the possibilities really go up from this. And it increases the tension that will occur later on in the story. And Absolutely. So I dropped that in. And, had I had to stick with an outline, I never would have had those opportunities. And some of those just come gradually, and
I think it's as you get to know your character. When you start to know your character and then you think, oh, if I put them in this situation, I don't know what it is, but I've tried writing with an outline, and it does not work for me. I go completely blank, and I feel like my characters sit there and say, yeah, we're not doing that with you. You let us know when you're done with that little experiment, and we'll get back to writing.
That is so interesting because I had a conversation with a bunch of people the other day, and they weren't writers. And I said, hypothetical question, I want to throw it out. Do you think the characters in my book, they'd all read it, do you think the characters in my book had free will? And they kind of understood that in the sense that you and I have free will, not really, but in the sense that they would do things kind of that would pop up because you knew who the character was, and you were kind of going, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm supposed to write this in as part of your character. And so, it's not like it's dictated from my head. It's almost like it pops. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean, because I've actually tried to write something before where I thought, ooh, this would solve this problem. And I've had a character say to me, yeah, I'm not doing that.
I love it.
And I'm like, you're what? Look, I need you to do this. And they're like, no, I wouldn't do that. And you're like, look, I don't have time for this, but it's an amazing feeling. And it does make you sound nuts. Yeah. When you try to explain it to people, they look at you like,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are a lot of people who thinks I'm a nut. So I get used to that, but you're exactly right. And thanks for affirming that feeling being not something that's, isolated to me.
Absolutely. Tell me, what was your favorite character to write and why?
That's a great question. Favorite character to write. The main character, Paul, is, in some ways, he's me, in the sense that every time I wrote about him, I was thinking, what would I do in this situation?
Right.
And so, there's a side of me that is so comfortable with everything he did and respecting for that. And so he was fun to write, but I think that there's a character in here named Tony, and he was very colorful and flamboyant and had lots of possibilities. But I think in some ways my favorite character was the suspect in this case, because he was kind of an underdog and he didn't really have a voice in this. And at the end, he gets a voice.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, and in fact, when I talked earlier about when I started writing this book, I started writing another couple of books. Mm-hmm. One of those other books, the central character was this suspect. There was a novel that was building based on that. And in fact, in the section at the end of the book where this character's story is being told, I cut and pasted from my other novel. And it was a first person account from this character's standpoint. And so I think in some ways, Terry, that character was my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there a part that you found really difficult?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a traumatic event that happens early in there. And I honestly didn't like having that event in there. But I wanted to have something happen where the husband was so irrationally angry,
right,
and felt so violated, as the wife had, that it was one of those things where nobody would find it hard to believe that the main character would do almost anything.
Right.
And I had to have that difficult thing occur. And so I didn't discuss it real time so that it was overly graphic.
Right.
It's more kind of reported, what happened. And I don't spend a huge amount of time on that. But, there were people who have known me many, many, many years. And I didn't want people to read this book and go, wow, I thought a lot of this guy. He's writing, this story. And it wasn't like it was, really graphic, or it wasn't.
No, it was. In fact, it was not graphic in any way. And it was central to the story. But the event itself was what was central, not the details.
Right. That's exactly right.
And so, yeah, you did a really good job with it, because as a woman reading it, I felt the wife's pain. I felt the husband's pain. I understood immediately the rationale going on in people's minds, but you didn't linger. We didn't have to get all the gory details. Yeah. And for me, that's really good, because gory details tended, I read through those really fast, because I have a very vivid imagination. I don't need anyone helping me.
Yeah.
So, right.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah. And the other thing is, I think when you put all the details in there, if that's what you're trying to sell, I mean, I think this is in some ways a very kind of emotionally packed book.
Yes.
And I think things where you're kind of writing from the heart, and there are things that are, kind of deep feelings, deep moral dilemmas that you're struggling with, and things like that. That's what I think people are more interested in. I mean, I've had a lot of people come to me and say, I'm not sure what I would have done in that situation. And I love these characters. And, are you going to come out with a sequel or something like that? Right.
So it's interesting, because that is, to me, the difference between a plot-driven story and a character-driven story. And exactly. I prefer to both read and write character-driven fiction.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm way more interested in an ordinary person who finds himself in an extraordinary circumstance. And now what? How are they going to handle it?
That's exactly what I feel like this is. Yeah.
Because he was going along just living his life and just living his life. And then all of a sudden, he's not living his life the way he was, because of an event completely outside of himself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And I love diving into the character and then trying to figure out, what would they think and what would they feel and how would they respond? And if a friend says this to them, what are they going to say back? And, are they going to be able to continue working the way they did before? Or is that all blown up? And all of those things. I love doing that aspect of people.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah. And I think what it does is it allows your reader to crawl into the character and kind of become the character, at least momentarily, while they're reading this book. And
that happened to me. I mean, even the unsavory characters that I've got in this book, and there are some, I loved. I loved them, I think, just because I created them. And, it's kind of like, I guess it's not the same as having kids, obviously, but, when you have a kid and they do something wrong, you still love them.
You still love them. You're not happy with them, but you still love them. Yeah.
And that's the way it is with my characters. Yeah. I kind of created them. I love them, but oh my gosh, what, why did you do that?
I know. I have a character in one of my books, and people always say to me, "Oh, I can't stand her. I just can't stand." Well, they're not supposed to like her. I mean, that's the point. But I actually always defend her every time, and I say, "Well, you do understand why she is the way she is, right?"
Yeah. I love that.
Because it's like, no, you're not supposed to like her. I wrote her so that you didn't like her, that she's a difficult character. You're not supposed to be madly in love with this woman.
Yeah.
But still, you do see why she's the way she is, right? There's this piece of me that wants them to, you don't have to like her, but can you understand her?
Yeah.
Can you see how she ended up there? Can that, so I know what you're feeling. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. And it's so interesting, because there's a female character, and I sort of plant the seed that, maybe she's got ulterior motives and things like that. there are people that pick up on that right out of the gate. And I don't like singling out one sex versus the other, but women sniff it out so fast. Men are oblivious as a general rule. I mean, need I say more? I mean, but anyway, I'm just saying that people smell, I mean, the women more often smell a rat right out of the gate.
Right.
And they pick up on it. So it's just interesting, the insights that different readers have, knowing what's coming down the road.
Right. I've loved going to like book clubs and having people say something that they got from the book. I sit there going, wow. Like, and they'll ask me, did you think about that when you were writing? And it's like, oh, I wish I had. No, it was like, that didn't occur to me at all.
Yeah.
So that's always fun, is to see, because readers bring their own experiences into the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, and one of the other things, you're not asking about this, but when I think about spending all that time, and I think about what are my takeaways from writing this book? One of the first ones that became very apparent is, hey, you're not doing it for the economics.
Right. Because by the time you look at all those hours, it's going to take a lot to get any kind of an hourly wage out of that.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. But the thing that I was surprised by was the connections and the relationships and the exchanges. I mean, Terry, you and me talking right now, we would not be talking save for there being a book that I ended up publishing.
Absolutely.
And so I've got a new friend. I've got, I'm potentially, maybe I say something helpful to one of your listeners or viewers.
Right.
And if I do that and I'm thinking about, hey, how do I make a meaningful impact in life? And, you do this all the time. I mean, you've been doing this for so many years and done more than 200 episodes. So, your reach, your impact on people is huge. And to think that, this book allows me to have a platform to talk to people and say, hey, there's a book in you if you want to do one. And,
Right.
People would have looked at me. I'm a financial analyst guy, and they would have said, he's not going to write a book. Everybody's got a story in them. Everybody.
Right. And then it's a matter of, do you want it? Do you want to sit down and take care of that? Absolutely.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about research, because there were a lot of things that happened in your book with the law and with, did you know all of that, or did you do some research to make sure that the kinds of things you were having your characters do could have really happened?
Yeah, it was a combination. There was a murder case in Michigan, and I found the transcript for the entire case. Okay. And so anytime that in this book, the judge addresses the jury and gives instructions as to opening arguments or closing arguments, and nothing that is said in the opening argument or closing argument is evidence. You've got to make a decision purely based on evidence that's been admitted. And in this case, Paul has some evidence that nobody else has.
Right.
And he can't reveal that. And that's the burden of evidence. That's what that really refers to. But in writing this, I really did want to be accurate in terms of process, the instructions that would be coming from the judge. And so I didn't obviously, plagiarize anything, but I studied that to make sure that the language conforms to what would typically be done. And there were certain aspects that I thought were, if you didn't know anything about law, might be interesting. For example, there's not a verdict of innocent. There's either guilty or not guilty. The state either proves it or the state doesn't. And it's black and white. And motive does not count. Motive doesn't bear any weight in that decision, guilty or not guilty. And so there were things like that I put into this, because in the jury, it's similar to the 12 Angry Men movie, or book that people write where there's all this tension in the jury deliberation, and they're wrestling with some of these questions, and the foreman of the jury says, well, let me explain the way it is, and all that's basically correct. So I've had a number of attorneys that have read it and said, look, thanks for doing the research and having it be true to form in terms of the legal process.
Well, I think that that's a very important aspect as an author. If I am writing something, I know that I'm writing fiction, but if I am writing my fiction within some kind of setting, the setting, if it's real, needs to be accurate.
Yep.
So you can't just have a judge doing whatever they want. You can't have lawyers just saying whatever they want. You can't have the jury just doing whatever they want, because those things really exist in our world. And so you have to do the research to make them real.
Absolutely.
Now you can have a rogue juror, you can do those things, but you have to do them within what's real. The only time that isn't true, I guess, would be maybe like in a fantasy book or something, or a sci-fi that's true. That isn't today and isn't or hasn't been, So yeah,
that credibility is so critical, and it kind of ties in with when we were talking about characters. You formulate these characters, and so by the time you get midway through the book, people know these characters. And so if you do something kind of inconsistent and you kind of break character for them, suddenly it loses credibility. You've lost credibility as the author. So you've got the factual things, but you've also got the consistency of the characters.
Right. And the only time a character could really break character, you have to understand why.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to see that this event pushed them, or this person.
That's exactly right.
Right. Because otherwise, if they just all of a sudden they've been going along as, the 100% perfect person who always does what they're told, and all of a sudden for no apparent reason, they've gone to the dark side. Yeah. You're like, what happened here? But if there's a reason, then you can do it. But you have to be really careful, because you have to recognize who this person was.
Exactly.
And how that's going to fit into this new thing that you have them doing. It's one of my favorite parts about writing. Absolutely.
Oh, I think so too.
Yeah. So, buddy, what's next for you? I hope this is not your last book.
I hope it's not too. I have had a lot of people say, hey, when are you going to have a sequel? And I've thought about that a lot. But, my experience is typically when I think about a follow-on, whether it's a movie or something else, I never quite feel like it lives up to the original.
Yeah, I always feel that way too.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of mulling a totally different book, and not in the legal thriller, not in the mystery. It would actually be a combination humorous and poignant. Yeah. So I love that. I'm kind of a heart-filled writer. There is very much an emotional element when I'm writing, and having something, I mean, I will give you an idea. This involves old men in a nursing home, and maybe this is me foreshadowing myself.
Right.
But as I get older, I think about that and think about this situation that they may end up working on together, these men. And I've got a couple of characters that I just love already, and a couple of scenes that I love already. And I just love doing something where it's not a typecast. So here's Buddy Howard's latest, legal thriller.
Right.
I've done that.
It's interesting. I feel the same way. My first 3 books were categorized as historical fiction. One was 1970s, one was World War II, and one was 1890s. I mean, very different things. My 4th book is a contemporary humor. And I had a lot of people say to me, oh, I thought you were a historical fiction author. And it's like, no, I'm a character-driven fiction author. And whatever character is living in my head at the moment, I put them where they need to be.
I love that.
And I love the era that we're in now, where Buddy Howard doesn't have to be a legal thriller writer and Terry Brown doesn't have to be a historical fiction author, that we can be many things.
Absolutely. And hopefully this won't turn people away from buying it, but I did self-publish.
Yeah.
And there is a level of control that I was able to maintain with timing, cover, edits, pricing, all of that. And, if I had an agent, I didn't have an agent even, but if I had an agent and a publisher that was pressing me to, this is who we think you need to be. I just love the idea of you're free. You can do whatever. And I think you do better work that way.
Yes. So I used a hybrid publisher, which is a lot like self-publishing. You just have a team behind you. And for me, it's the same thing. I didn't want someone telling me what I was.
Absolutely.
I also didn't want someone telling me what my cover had to be and what my next book had to be. And, I don't know. I don't really like people telling me what to do. So.
Same here. And and Terry, you're very accomplished. I mean, you've sold a lot of books and you've gotten phenomenal ratings on your books. So, there is no limitation for anyone who chooses to either self or hybrid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that isn't to say there's anything wrong with publishing the traditional way. I think that it really depends a lot on who you are, what you want to do, how you want to accomplish it. I just know for me, the hybrid publisher worked really well. I may very well self-publish my next one. I'm not sure yet, but, I just think you have to kind of look at what's going to work for you.
I think that's right. And I may go traditional. Exactly. I may go traditional next, if somebody was interested in it.
Right.
And I like learning new things. And I learned a huge amount doing the self-publishing route.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, just to give you one brief thing, I mean, I didn't know what the size of the book should be.
Right.
And so, I thought, should this be 5.5 by 7.5? So I didn't know. And so I did, sort of a silly thing. I took a tape measure to Barnes and Noble and started measuring books. So they thought, what is this guy doing with the tape measure? But, I did things like that. And I ended up learning a lot about what do you do to make it look like you know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And so learning that was a lot of fun for me.
I'm sure it was. Buddy, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, talk with you about the burden of evidence, talk with you about the things you're writing in the future, what's the best way to do that?
There is a website, www.buddyhoward.com, and I have a email address that you could send that I use for my business is buddy@equityresearch.com. Okay. That's probably the safest way to get to me because I check that email every day. But there's a different buddy@buddyhoward.com is also another one that people can use. So either of those.
So guys, I'll have that in the show notes so that you'll be able to reach right out to Buddy, run out, grab yourself a copy of The Burden of Evidence. You're going to love it. It's a great book, lots of twists and turns. I enjoyed it thoroughly. When you're done, make sure that you jump on to Amazon and review it because as authors, we need those reviews so badly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. And
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah. And I want to thank you so much for being with me today, Buddy. This has been wonderful.
Oh, you were a delight, Terry. Thank you so much. This was fun.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.